CKN is a lot like rock. So long as Alice in Chains is releasing music, it's never truly dead. And I'm never truly dead until, I'm dead. Anyway, Alice in Chains, Rainier Fog, the first album from these gents in 5 years, and really at this stage of their career, it's okay that they're taking a little bit of time. They're kind of Iron Maidening their way through albums. The last album that we got was The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here, back in 2013, and what's kind of odd about Rainier Fog is that makes it the third album in the post-Elaine Staley universe of Alice in Chains. So it would make it the tripod album, or the self-titled album, if we're doing the chronology correctly. And there are some strange similarities between those two, but we'll get to that as we go along. So this is a 10-track affair, roughly about 54 minutes in length, and we had 3 singles precede this album, with So Far Under, we had Never Fade, and The One You Know. And what's kind of odd about this is that The One You Know, which is also the opener on this album, was written with David Bowie a little bit in mind. Now, you might not necessarily see some of those similarities within the lyricism, however, that's kind of who Jerry was talking about, thinking about, and was sort of on his mind whenever it came to the whole One You Know idea. And as a result, this is a pretty cool opener that does show that Alice in Chains' charm and spirit, the vocal harmonies that Alice in Chains have put together within these two eras. There's not really one that is bad. Both of these eras are very, very good, and the vocal harmonies has always been an Alice in Chains highlight. But man, starting off on this, it's something that is immediate. It's something that you kind of go toward immediately whenever you listen to an Alice record, and it's something that gets going right out of the gate with The One You Know. It's a pretty solid opener going into the title track, Rainier Fog. Now, this is a track that goes in a little bit of a different direction. It speaks more about Seattle, considering that Rainier is based off of Mount Rainier, which is in the Seattle area. That's what the whole thing is sort of geared around. This is the first album that they've recorded in Seattle in roughly about 22 years or so. It's been a while. So there is a bit of a strong feel, almost like a homesick, nostalgic feel to this. And so Rainier Fog does have sort of a feeling and a feeler out there toward the grunge scene and that whole idea. So in a way, it almost sounds very reflective, but the music itself also feels very much like an homage to that era, and not necessarily just Alice's contributions, but you can even hear some hints of maybe the Screaming Trees even, though definitely not with the same softness that you got from that band. So we go into Red Giant. And Red Giant is the first of what I would call the really great standout tracks on this album. I like it whenever Alice is able to, especially in this era, by the way, I like it whenever they expand. I like it whenever they go 5, 6, 7 minutes, because it seems like every time they do that, the track has some sort of individuality that makes it almost an instantaneous desire for a repetition, a repeated listen. This is an interesting song lyrically, and I kind of like it. It seems like it's geared toward the idea of somebody really putting themselves out there on stage, and really everybody loves what they do, but at the same time, back before the fame and back before all of the glory, this person was oftentimes ostracized or treated as nothing. So almost like a very strange FU, but at the same time, a self-reflective one, recognizing that you're putting out all of this, sort of almost self-defeating energy in order to have the heralding and the love of millions. So the Red Giant being an allusion to how one blows up. And it's a really cool track. I like what this one does. I like the composition overall. I think that it just fits, and it's an early album, a great song. A great song on the early portion of the album, going into Fly, which is an interesting cut. That again, the harmonies. I can only speak about the harmonies so much. Fly has some great ones, as well as Drone. Drone goes 6:29, so it even has a longer run time than Red Giant. And I like this one compositionally because right in the middle it takes a break and sort of goes into a brand new direction. It starts off as your trademark Alice in Chains rocker, then kind of tries to saunter into that Alice in Chains familiar territory of kind of darkening the mood a bit, or at least using the harmony and some acoustics in order to really drive a real tempo change, a real shift, and it works for the minute or so that it exists before returning back into the pattern. It's almost like a nice bridge or a nice little connective portion in order to give the track a little bit more longevity, but also give it variety and character, and it definitely helps this track shine a little bit. But then we get into Deaf Ears, Blind Eyes, and if you guys remember my review of The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here from 2013, right around this point in the album, track 6, 7, or 8, there was Low Ceiling on that disc, and I immediately I fell in love with that song and grew very attached to it, and it now has an extremely personal meaning to you, or to me rather. I feel like Deaf Ears, Blind Eyes could very easily have that same effect, because the minute that this track started, the minute its kind of odd introductory pattern was brought to my ears, it just immediately felt like something very different. It felt like Alice taking a bit of a risk while still retaining their own sound, and there was just a link to it that immediately presented itself. Now, Alice has always been a band that's been able to do that with me. I've had a very close relationship with this music ever since I first heard it back in the 1990s, but this is, whenever you have this instantaneously, whenever you're listening to a brand new record for the very first or second or third time, and you have that immediate attachment, then you can tell that it's a song that really speaks to you, and I like how this song is able to navigate the waters of sort of its own uncertainty, which is pretty cool. And then we get into Maybe, which is just as strange, and this is where the comparisons between the Tripod album from the middle 90s and this album do have some similarities, because the Tripod album was a bit strange. The Tripod album was a bit experimental. It was Alice in Chains going sort of off the beaten path, going off the rails, and sampling some weird out there ideas, perhaps influenced a little bit with Lane and Mad Season, perhaps influenced just by wanting to take things in a different, in an awkward direction, maybe something where they didn't want to retain that sort of depressive, rage that was expressed on Dirt, that almost suicidal agony that was shown on that album, not wanting to stay in that position at all times, constantly trying to grow. And Maybe almost sounds a bit like Kansas at the beginning, considering all that you hear are those vocal harmonies, and it's one that has that very pleasant and almost very reflective tone to it. And this whole entire song is extremely reflective in its lyricism. It sounds very deeply like it is somebody who is trying to honestly assess what they are to do next. What is the next move in life? What is the next thing to be done? And then ultimately coming to a conclusion that we are constantly searching for answers. It's a great song, and the fact that they utilize those very empty and vacant vocal harmonies only makes it 10 times better. Now, So Far Under and Never Fade, you guys probably know about, considering you've already listened to this. Listen to these songs. They were the singles that preceded it, but William Duvall was instrumental in writing one of these tracks, and of course many people think that this is still Jerry Cantrell's ship and William is just along for the ride. He's never going to be the captain of the ship, and you're right about that. It's always going to be Captain Jerry Cantrell, but William has been definitely elevated to first mate or something like that. Somebody give me nautical terms to really fit this metaphor, because he is able to get the reins and writes a really strong song about perseverance in So Far Under. And Never Fade, by the way, in mind has folks such as Mike Inez as well as Chris Cornell in mind with its lyricism, and it's a true statement. It's a true statement, and both of these songs are very well done. But that being said, absolutely nothing that you've heard on these 9 tracks prepares you for what All I Am is able to deliver. This is a 7-minute, 14-second long closer. Now, if you're in a band, study this track and note where it's at. Your last song on an album, what have I said now for 10 years? Your last song should always leave a lasting impression. And All I Am did leave a lasting impression. It's the best song on the album. It is the best track on the album. I know that I just told you that I got a very personal vibe and connection with Deaf Ears, Blind Eyes, like Maybe, like these other tracks, but All I Am is the best song on this record, because all of a sudden, this goes back, it harkens back to the days of the 1990s. It takes that classic leap back 20 years into the past to where you maybe would want to listen to Alice in Chains with the room only being lit by candles, and it's going to give you an emotional affliction. It's going to give you just this feeling of almost emptiness or longing, but at the same time, All I Am has a very honest message to it that this is all that, literally, this is all that I am, but do I recognize the face that's in the mirror, or the face that I see? This is a track that is truly speaking about change. It speaks about perhaps addiction. It speaks about a lot of different things. It can be taken many different ways, and the crawling version of this musically is just absolutely a sight to behold. You might complain that there's not enough twists, bends, or turns in Alice's brand new persona, but I think that that's a good thing. I think the way in which they approach a track such as All I Am is what makes it so powerful, and what immediately kind of gets some of those emotions and those feelings going within your brain, considering it just crawls and it feels very much like a scene that perhaps you've had or experienced, or at least rehearsed in your own brain. Perhaps you've stared at a mirror and not liked the person that was within the reflection. But either way, this 7-minute and 14-second long song, this closer, this finale, leaves a lasting impression, and definitely leaves you wanting to maybe go back to not only this track, but perhaps go back to track number 1 and take this ride all over again. That's what a strong closer can do. That's why you want to have a very, very powerful and different final cut on your release. So where are we score-wise? Where are we score-wise? It's so weird. It's so weird. Before we even get to the score, Facelift and Black Gives Way to Blue, kind of similar in a weird way. In a weird way. With Facelift, are they metal or are they grunge? Are they rock? What is this band? Black Gives Way to Blue, are they reflective? Are they sad? Is this all about Lane Staley? What's going to be like with the William Duvall? There's a lot of uncertainty with both of those releases. But at the same time, Facelift is iconic. Black Gives Way to Blue, great return to form. Then you get into Dirt and The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here. Focused. Great sophomore effort from the William Duvall era. There's a lot of great similarities there. Some of the songs are just dark and in your face. Some of the tracks also have just a terrific attitude. And there's a song such as Phantom Limb on The Devil Put Dinosaurs Here that just feels absolutely dense, layered, and destructive. And then you get to the Tripod album and Rainier Fog. Once again, the comparisons continue. They go off the beaten path a little bit. They try some new things. They try. And honestly, Rainier Fog is the type of album where this is where Alice should be at this point in their career. Because Alice in Chains is 30 years old, basically. They are 30 years old. And for them to still write the same way that they did in the 1990s is kind of an unfair expectation. So what they are doing right now, with some of the songs having a little bit more of that hope in mind, with some of those songs having a little bit more of that maybe hopeful cadence to it, or a little bit more of a reflective cadence to it, it just makes a lot of sense. That being said, it's a record that's not necessarily going to win any Album of the Year awards, at least not for this channel, but it's still a great effort. 23 out of 30, definitely an album that I enjoyed listening to, and then re-listening to, and re-listening to, and I then had to pull myself away by the shirt just so I could come and try to record this video. Considering we haven't done a lot of reviews in the past couple of months, and it's been kind of empty and vacant, it's because I have not liked the voice that I've had, and this is the first time that I've enjoyed what I have been saying, and it has felt like I've said something with one of these reviews, as opposed to just feeling like I was regurgitating CKNisms over the past 10 years, considering how many albums that we have talked about. How many ways, and how many different ways truly, can you review an album before you eventually are running into the same tropes, running into the same cliches, and eventually just hating the sound of your own voice? Well, I finally reached that point, and now hopefully that is a moment of the past that no promises can be kept. I want to know what you think about Rainier Fog by Alice in Chains. Is this another great album to add to their post-Lane Staley collection? Are you still pissed that this band is around without Lane? Have you not gotten over that yet? Just like Opeth fans can't get over the fact that there's no more growls. It's been 10 years. Get over it. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. My name is CoverKillerNation. I'm not dead yet. And I will talk to each and every one of you guys next time.